on this exceedingly chilly and cold wintry morning in the city of New York, in the 106th year of the founding of the NAACP, there is in this city and across the land a chilly wind blowing. We find ourselves at this moment in time at the crossroads of history and hope. We find ourselves at this moment, at this inflection point of history, 50 years after the Selma to Montgomery March, in which the heroes and heroines of the civil rights movement marched down blood-soaked highways and courage-crowned byways. 50 years after a Sabbath day in which those of faith celebrated the blood of the Lamb and also recognized and noted, and historians yet note, the blood shed by those who are children of our Father who art in heaven on a day called Bloody Sunday. 50 years later, 50 years after the passage of the Voting Rights Act, 50 years in which the voting booth, the ballot box, was yet declared a place in which a civic sacrament is honored. 50 years after which the ballot box was covered with the blood, sweat, and tears of people in this room. 50 years later, we find ourselves at a moment in which the American labor movement has been declared by some to be dead, to be decrepit, to be worn out. And so at this moment, in this hour, there are those who are tempted to be discouraged, to be disconcerted, to be despairing. In this moment, there are those who yet believe that we are in the midst of a Shakespearean season in which some yet declare, now is the winter of our discontent. But if I were somewhere else, if I were among another group of people, there might be an occasion to despair. There might be an occasion to be depressed. There might be an occasion to be disconcerted. But because I am here in the midst of my brothers and sisters, because I am here in the midst of this active, vibrant, dynamic, courageous labor movement, I'm not discouraged. I'm not discouraged. My heart is emboldened by those I'm standing in the midst of. And so on this cold and wintry moment and the morning, I want to share a few thoughts with you under the topic for such a time as this. For such a time as this. Because we in this labor movement, in this civil rights movement, in this joint, combined, collective social justice movement are concerned about our children, concerned about our grandchildren, and yet concerned about our brothers and sisters, so much so that we yet declare ourselves our brothers and our sisters' keeper, particularly in the midst of this Women's History Month. Because of that, I just want to lift up three themes for your consideration today. Those themes being these: income inequality, criminal justice, or rather, more precisely stated, criminal injustice, rendering our citizenry criminalized. And lastly, voting rights. At this moment in history, economists from Berkeley, California to Paris, France, from the pages of Robert Reich and Thomas Piketty. They are yet all writing about the fact that we have 1% earning the wages, the capital, the sum total of the wealth of the 99%. We are at a moment in our economic history where the conclusions of economists are reaffirmed by the paychecks of workers, which is to say that you can work day in and day out, from sunup to sundown, from can't see in the morning to can't see at night, and at the end of the week, at the end of your shift, you yet see a few pennies relative to the wealth of the 1%. And there are those in the midst of their skepticism and their cynicism who yet say to us, you should not fall prey to redistributionist economics. They say don't engage in class warfare. We're not engaging in redistributionist economics. Adam Smith, the father of modern day economics, he whom the conservatives and the libertarians fall in obeisance to, at his knees, he yet declared that in every society there should be not a minimum wage, but a living wage. That's what their economists yet said. So we are not the ones proposing redistributionist economics. We're proposing fair economics, equitable economics, constitutional economics, economics that yet reflect the values of our Constitution and the morals of our society. The form and theory of economics that is reflected in the words of the prophet, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Those are the economics we yet believe in. An economist who didn't call himself such, whose words are found in the ancient book of economics called the book of Proverbs, yet declares the fields of the poor yield much, but the fruit is taken away through injustice. I say in 2015, when you work hard, when you struggle hard, when you go to school and study late at night and get up early in the morning, at the end of the week, you deserve fair pay. You deserve fair working conditions. You deserve the very best of our society. You deserve that. Your children deserve that. Your grandchildren deserve that. We, as Americans, deserve that. And we deserve no less, not now, not ever. Any semi-tutored economic observer can't help but conclude that in this society, as a consequence of accumulated wealth, suppressed wages, a lax trade policy, that jobs are being exported while our wages are being depressed. So much so that we see American workers on a creaky down escalator descending into ever more and greater desperation, while the 1% finds itself on a high-speed elevator ascending to ever more wealth. But if we have economists and academicians and scholars and teachers and police officers and healthcare workers yet saying this is unsustainable. You can't have a free society where everybody is working for something akin to free wages. It's just not possible. And so we've got to be clear. The White House and the Congress can't stand for free and unfair trade. It won't work, it's not acceptable, and we won't go for it. You can't half-heartedly back minimum, unliving, and unlivable wages. We can't stand it, and we won't. We can't build a first-class healthcare system premised on working on the backs of unpaid and underpaid workers. It can't work, it won't work, and we won't stand for it. Second issue. Our criminal justice system is one in which we are criminalizing our citizenry even as we demoralize our workers. Let's be clear, these two issues are connected. When we think about the fact that we have 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's prisoners, 2.3 million people behind bars, 1 out of every 4 adults having a criminal record, or 65 million Americans with a criminal record, 1 out of every 3 young people being arrested by the age of 23. And here in the city of New York, we're still feeling the effect of a stop and frisk policy that criminalized an entire generation. But the criminal justice challenges and the worker challenges not only stand side by side, they stand together. How so? When you have a record of incarceration, you lose $100,000, at least that, over the course of your working years. When you have a record of incarceration or even a criminal record for a non-violent offense, your opportunities to move up, to move forward, to move in the midst of this American economy are depressed and suppressed. In other words, you leave prison, if you've even been to prison, with a record that is really a life sentence to unemployment. That's not right. And so as a labor movement, as the NAACP, we say clearly that we've got to reform this criminal justice system so that people are allowed to work and assume responsibility over their lives. Because these kinds of reforms, whether it be ban the box, whether it be putting an end to stop and frisk policies, whether it be putting an end to the collateral sanctions that keep people from working, are predicated on a couple of moral propositions. Those being these. If a woman has committed a crime, be clear, her rap sheet, her fingerprints, and her mugshot do not constitute the sum total of her worth and her dignity as a child of God. Second, if a man has paid his debt to society with the hard currency of responsibility, he deserves a second chance, particularly if he never had much of a first chance. To make the point clear, a story is told of a police officer who only a few years ago found at the bottom of a file cabinet 2 photographs. One photograph depicted a young man with a precocious sense of gravitas and a ministerial bearing. Beneath this young man's picture were these numbers: 7089. The second photograph, a sepia tone photograph or picture of yesteryear, depicted an older woman possessing a beautiful dignity. But that dignity was defaced like the grime of graffiti on a wall with these numbers: 7053. We don't know the young man by the number 7089. We don't know the young man by his mugshot. We don't know the young man by his arrest record. We know him by the name, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We don't know. The older woman, by the mugshot, by the arrest record, by her indicia of criminality, that is, civil disobedience in advance or in the furtherance of our constitutional values. We know her by the name the school children know her the world over. That is to say, Mrs. Rosa Louise Parks. You're not defined by your criminal record. You're defined by our God above. You are an American citizen, and you deserve the right to vote, the right to work, the right to hold your head high. Third issue. In this 50th anniversary year of Selma. 50 years after the Selma to Montgomery March. 50 years after Bloody Sunday. 50 years after labor linked arms with the faith community, linking arms with civil rights marchers, linking arms with people of every hue and every heritage, of every color and every class, standing on the precepts and the principles of our American Constitution. 50 years later, our right to vote is imperiled, it is threatened, it is under assault. In the wake of the Shelby versus Holder Supreme Court decision, our state legislatures from coast to coast have engaged in a Machiavellian frenzy of disenfranchisement. In the great state of Texas, an ID which allows you to carry a concealed weapon is deemed sufficient civic and democratic proof of identification such that you can vote. But that an ID which allows you to carry a book of Shakespeare, a book of poetry, a book of engineering, that form of ID, the kind of ID you carry, the kind of ID your grandchildren carry, the kind of ID that you taught them to carry, that is an ID that proves that you're striving to educate yourself, to better yourself. That's not deemed a sufficient proof of identities that will allow you to vote. In the state of North Carolina, that ID that allows you to walk across a military installation like Fort Bragg or Camp Lejeune, that's a sufficient form of identification such that you can vote. But the form of ID that allows you to walk across the campus of Duke, or North Carolina Central, or North Carolina State, the same place and places we're trying to send our children, that's not a sufficient form of identification. But my brothers and sisters, I want to say to you very clearly, I'm not sure what jurisprudential theory they subscribe to. I'm not sure what the Supreme Court was thinking, but here's what I do know. We're not going to allow Congress to give medals to those who marched 50 years ago while not giving us a committee vote on protecting the right to vote. We're not having it. We're not accepting that. We're not going to go for that. The story is told fellow soldier in the social justice movement by the name of Medgar Evers. The story is told that he came home, perhaps like many of us in this room, at the end of a long, hard day. The kind of day where you just want to get inside. The kind of day when you just want to take your shoes off. The kind of day when you just want to lay your head down. The kind of day where you just want to hold your children. The kind of day where you're just tired. He came home at the end of such a day, and rather than leaving the passenger side of his car, which was his security protocol, allowing him a little more coverage with the open door from the threats he faced daily, he exited the driver's side of his car. And when he got out of his car, an assassin fired a deer rifle and fired bullets into his legacy, bullets into his life, bullets into that which he left us. But as Medgar Evers lay dying, his dying words were these: set me up and turn me loose. Sit me up and turn me loose. My brothers and sisters, 50 years later, in this Selma anniversary year, if he said on his dying bed, sit me up, we say, stand up, stand for the right to vote, stand against injustice, stand against tyranny, stand and stand and stand again. In the firmament of our freedoms, in the constellation of our constitutional rights, the right to vote shines as a North Star. We will not allow that light to go out. We will not allow that light to dim. We will not allow that light to darken, because we will stand and we will stand and we will stand and we will march and we will fight again and again and again, day in and day out, because we will never give in. We will never give up. We will never relent, because the right to vote is ours and we will not allow them to take it away. My concluding words to you are these. In this, the winter of our discontent, there are those who assume that labor should sit in its camp. The civil rights movement should sit sequestered in its camp. The Gen Xers should sit in their camp. And business people can sit in a camp by themselves. But I want to be clear with you. We can't sit sequestered, separated, and segregated by our differences. Martin Luther King declared himself, as a consequence of his convictions and his beliefs and his philosophy, a member of 1199. I'm not entirely sure how much of the dues. I'm not entirely sure what are the prerequisites and requirements for membership. But I simply say to you, as a consequence of our convictions, as a consequence of our beliefs, as a consequence of our philosophy, and as a consequence of our God, I stand with you today. The NAACP stands with you as a member of 1199. We stand together. We stand together. We stand together, and we will not be separated. So in this anniversary year, we're going to stand together, and we're going to build a movement. You can call this movement by any number of names, but you might also call it an American journey for justice. You might call it a movement in which we walk together, we struggle together, we hold hands together, we strategize together around our lives, our jobs, our votes, and our schools matter. We come together in a common movement, building alliances, broadening the tent, broadening the coalition, bringing young people together, and creating an agenda, a strategy, so that 2016 does not happen to us, we happen to them. So in the days ahead, we'll expect more discussion, more deliberation, more partnership, more collaboration. But I want to leave you with this thought. There was a freedom fighter by the name of Frederick Douglass, a man of prophetic presence, a leonine bearing, and a prophetic gaze. And he yet says to us down the corridors of time these words to speak to us now. There is no progress without struggle. Those who profess to favor freedom yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the sea without the roar of its mighty waters. There can be no progress without struggle. My brothers and sisters, I say to you today, we will not give up. We will not give in. We will not give over.